She could hear every thought, until she met him. Celira walked through the busy alien market with her hood up. Strange lights blinked above her, and voices from 100 different species echoed all around. But she wasn't listening with her ears. She was listening with her mind. She could hear them all. I need to sell this before sunset. Don't let anyone see the stolen parts. That fruit looks good. Maybe I can steal one. Thoughts floated to her like soft whispers. They always did. She didn't even have to try. Celira had been reading minds since she was a child. Some called it a gift. Others called it a curse. But for her, it was normal. The Galactic Council trained her, used her, praised her when she helped stop wars before they started, feared her when she uncovered secrets no one was supposed to know. No one could lie to her. Until today. She was walking to the prison sector. The Council had captured a dangerous human. He had no name, no ID, no record, just a cold stare and silence. Other telepaths had tried to read him. Each one failed. One even passed out. That's when they called her. Celira stepped into the dark hallway. 2 guards nodded and opened the cell door. Inside, a man sat on the ground, hands chained, head down. He didn't move when she entered. She stood still and reached out with her mind. The usual way. Slowly, carefully. Nothing. No whisper, no emotion, no surface thought. Just silence. Her eyes widened. This was impossible, everyone thought. Even in sleep, the brain spoke. Even animals had simple thoughts. But this man, he was like a black wall. Celira stepped closer, trying again. She focused harder, digging deeper. And then, a wave of something hit her. Not a word, not a sentence, not even a thought. Just feeling. Pain. Raw, deep, endless pain. Images rushed into her mind. A burning city. Screaming children. Blood on the ground. A hand reaching out. A small girl being pulled away. A voice crying. No. Celira gasped and fell to her knees. Her heart raced. Her hands shook. For the first time in her life, she cried. The human slowly looked up. His eyes were tired, broken, like someone who had lived through 1,000 storms and lost every time. He didn't smile, didn't speak. He just watched her. She wiped her tears, confused and angry. What are you? He didn't answer. She stood up, trembling. You're hiding your thoughts. How? Still, no reply. She turned to leave, but just before stepping out, he said something. His voice was soft, like the wind in an empty field. You're not the first to ask that, but you're the first to feel it. She froze. Celira turned slowly. What do you mean? He looked at the wall. They all tried to read my mind. None could. But you felt something. Pain, she whispered. So much pain. He nodded once. That's all that's left. Silence filled the room. Celira didn't know what to say. For the first time in years, her mind felt quiet. This man, this human, had broken every rule of her world. And somehow he had touched her heart. She left the cell, but her thoughts stayed behind. Who was he? What happened to him? Why did she cry? The next day, she told the council, he's different. I need more time. They agreed, but warned her, do not trust him. Deep inside, she already did, and that scared her more than anything. The human prisoner who broke her gift. Celira didn't sleep that night. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the wall. Her hands were cold. Her mind, usually full of voices and thoughts from across the city, was quiet. It had never been quiet before. But now, silence. Or maybe, not silence. Something else, something heavier, something she couldn't explain. She kept seeing his face, the human prisoner, his sad, broken eyes, his voice, soft like dust, and that strange moment when her powers failed, and instead of hearing thoughts, She felt pain. It had never happened before. The next morning, she walked into the council chamber. 7 tall aliens sat in a circle, glowing symbols floating above their heads. They didn't speak with mouths. They used mind voices, powerful ones. Report. Celera stood straight. The human. He's not normal. We already know that. What else? He's not just hiding his thoughts. It's like he's sealed, locked. But something inside him is still alive. Pain. Grief. Something old and deep. The council was quiet. Then one spoke. You will enter his mind. Fully. No more gentle methods. Use force if needed. Celera hesitated. That could damage him. He is not one of us. If he knows anything dangerous, we must see it. She bowed. Yes, council. But in her heart, she wasn't sure anymore. The guards opened the cell door again. The human was in the same place, on the floor, back against the wall, hands still chained. He looked up when she entered. This time, she didn't wait. She sat in front of him, crossed her legs, and stared into his eyes. I need to know who you are, she said. He said nothing. She reached out with her mind. This time, not gently. She pushed. Hard. The world around her faded. She was no longer in the cell. She stood in the middle of a burning city. The sky was black with smoke. Buildings were falling. People screamed. Alien ships flew above, firing red beams into the ground. She turned and saw him. The same human, but younger. In a soldier's uniform, covered in blood and dirt, carrying a little girl. Celera recognized the girl. It was her. Before the memory faded, the human looked directly at Celera. Why are you here? He said, though this was his memory. She stepped back. This is your mind. Yes, and you're not supposed to be here. You saved me, she whispered. I tried. Then the memory shattered. She woke up on the floor of the cell, gasping. The human was kneeling beside her, hands still chained. His face showed concern. Are you okay? He asked softly. Celera blinked. How do you know my name? He looked away. I used to say it every night before falling asleep, hoping you were still alive. She sat up. Her heart pounded. That girl, was that me? He nodded. You're my father, he said. The word didn't feel real. But how? She asked. How did I forget everything? He smiled sadly. They took you, after the invasion, wiped your memories, raised you in the Telepath Academy, made you one of them. Tears filled her eyes. Why didn't you stop them? I tried. For years, I searched every system, every planet. I let them capture me because I heard rumors about a mind reader with glowing eyes and no past. Me. He nodded. You should hate me, she said. Never. That night, Celera sat alone outside his cell. She didn't report anything to the council. Not yet. Her whole world had changed in one day. Her memories were still hidden behind thick walls in her mind, but tiny cracks had opened. She remembered a teddy bear, a soft voice reading bedtime stories, laughter under a tree, hands lifting her up in the air, a father's warm hug. Was it all real? And if it was, then everything the council told her was a lie. The next morning, something worse happened. The council called her again. Progress. She said nothing at first. Did you see anything? She shook her head. His mind is dangerous, even for me. Then we must remove him. He is a threat. Celera felt her stomach drop. What do you mean by remove? Elimination. Before others learn what he hides. She stepped back. You want me to kill him? You are the only one who can enter his mind. If he escapes, he may spread human influence again. We will not allow that. But he's not dangerous. Do not question the council. Celera walked out of the chamber, her face pale. The same guards who once smiled at her now looked at her with cold eyes. Everyone around her felt different, darker. She returned to the prison, opened the door. He looked up. "They're going to kill me, aren't they?" She nodded. He sighed. "They've already won, then." "No," she whispered. "Not yet." "What do you mean?" She unlocked the chains. His eyes widened. "What are you doing?" "What I should have done yesterday." "You'll be branded a traitor." "I don't care." They didn't escape that night, but something else happened. When Celira held his hand, she suddenly saw everything. A flood of memory unlocked. Not from him, from her. Birthdays, singing, hiding under blankets during storms. A red bicycle, the smell of pancakes, her real name, Mira. She looked into his eyes. "You're not just my father. You're the only truth I have left." He smiled. For the first time, he knew her secret and her real name. Celira didn't leave the cell for hours. She sat across from the human, her father, and watched him closely. His face was tired, rough from years of suffering, but his eyes, they held something warm, something familiar. Deep inside her, the name Mira echoed again and again. Was that really her? Her entire life, she had been Celira, the gifted telepath, raised by the Galactic Council to serve, to obey, to never ask questions. But now, questions were all she had. "How do you know that name?" she asked finally. The man looked at her gently. "I gave it to you, when you were born." She swallowed. "They told me I was born on a colony, that I was special, chosen for service." He shook his head. "They lied." Celira stood up and began pacing the cell. Her thoughts raced. "So everything, all of it, my life, is a lie." "Not everything," he said. "You're still strong, still kind. You haven't forgotten how to feel. That's why you cried." She stopped walking. "I don't cry." He smiled. "You do now." She hated how calm he was, hated how sure he seemed. But most of all, she hated that part of her believed every word he said. The next morning, Celira went back to her chambers. Her hands trembled as she accessed her private file. Her identity, birth planet, classified, parents, unknown, memory wipes, multiple, level 7 security, reason, unstable origin, potential risk. Her breath caught in her throat. They really had erased her past. Her fingers hovered over the file. She tried unlocking more, but the system blocked her. Access denied. Even for her. She stared at the screen. Unstable origin. So the council always knew. They knew where she came from. They knew she was human. Later that night, she returned to the cell again. The man, her father, sat quietly. She sat too, but closer this time. "Tell me everything." He nodded. "You were 5 when they came." "Who?" "The council. They said Earth was too violent, too emotional. They feared humans would spread rebellion. So they attacked." Celira listened, silent. "I tried to protect you," he continued, "but they took you. I thought you were dead for years. Then I heard rumors of a telepath with unmatched power, a girl with no past. I knew it was you." Tears filled her eyes. "You searched all this time, every day. But why me? Why did they want me?" "Because of what you can do. Not just read minds, but feel them. Change them. You're more than a weapon, Mira. You're hope." She shook her head. "I don't even know who I am anymore." He gently placed his hand over hers. "You're my daughter. That's a good place to start." The next day, everything changed. As she walked down the corridor, a fellow council officer stopped her. "Your orders," he said, handing her a metal cube. "For the human." She opened it. Inside was a neural injector, designed for quiet, painless execution. Celira stared at it, her chest tight. "They said you might hesitate," the officer added, watching her. She nodded slowly, pretending to be calm. "I won't." But inside, her heart screamed. Back in the cell, she held the injector behind her back. He looked at her. "They told you, didn't they?" She nodded. He leaned back against the wall. "Then do it. Why are you not afraid?" she asked. "Because you already chose. The second you cried for me, you changed." Her hand trembled. The injector felt like ice. "I can't," she whispered, dropping it. He nodded. "I know." Selira turned, walked to the corner, and activated her comm. "Emergency protocol," she said. Subject escaped. Initiating lockdown. The lie was risky. Very risky. But she had to buy time. That night, she broke him out. The corridors were dark. She used her access to disable the security doors. The two of them moved like shadows. But just before they reached the exit, alarms blared. "They know," he said. "Then we run." They barely made it to the hangar. Selira activated an old scout ship. It was small, fast, and unregistered. Guards chased them down the runway. Lasers fired. Her father was hit in the leg, but kept moving. They jumped into the ship. She hit the controls. The ship blasted into the sky, cutting through the darkness like lightning. They were gone. Hours later, in deep space, the ship floated quietly. Selira treated his wound. Her hands were gentle but unsure. "Why are you doing this?" she asked herself aloud. "Why do I care so much?" He looked at her, eyes soft. "Because even after everything, you're still human." She blinked. "You feel, you cry, you love. They tried to take it from you, but they failed." Her voice cracked. "What now?" "Now, we survive. And maybe, we find others." "Others?" "Humans, hybrids, rebels, anyone who still believes in truth." Selira stared out the window. Stars stretched in all directions, a million voices in the galaxy, but only one had made her cry. And for that one, she would risk everything. Buried memories and a terrible truth. The stars outside the ship blinked softly, but inside, everything was quiet. Selira sat by the window, her arms around her knees. Her father, still weak from the escape, rested on the bunk nearby. Every few minutes he coughed. She looked at him with worry, but he always smiled and said, "I'm fine." He wasn't. She could feel it. Not with her gift, with her heart. 2 days passed in deep space. No messages, no signs of life. Only silence. On the third day, Selira found something in the ship's old data logs. An ancient signal. It wasn't from the Council or any known system. It was hidden, masked under old rebel codes. "This could be a trap," she said. Her father nodded. "Or it could be hope." They followed the signal. The ship landed on a forgotten moon. The surface was dry and cracked, with ruins of what looked like a human outpost, broken walls, rusted machines, and old rebel flags torn by the wind. But there were lights underground. Selira scanned the ruins. "Someone's here." They stepped into the tunnels. After minutes of walking, a voice echoed, "Identify yourselves." Dozens of red lasers lit up their faces. "Wait," Selira shouted. "I'm not with the Council anymore. We're here in peace." "You're lying," a voice growled. "You're Selira, the mind reader, the weapon." "Not anymore," she said. "My name is Mira." Silence followed. Then the lasers turned off. A door opened. A tall woman with silver hair stepped out. She looked at Selira, then at the man beside her. Her eyes widened. "General Ryan." Her father nodded slowly. "I'm still alive." "Barely." The woman fell to her knees. "You were our hero." Inside the base, everything felt different. There were humans, children, old soldiers, alien allies, broken, tired, but alive. They led Selira and her father to a medical room. He was taken for treatment. Selira sat outside, staring at the metal walls. She was safe, but she didn't feel safe. Inside her, something was still broken. That night, she had another dream. She was a child again, running through green fields, laughing, her father chasing her. Then the sky darkened. Council ships appeared. Her father yelled, "Run, Mira, hide." She hid under a tree. But someone grabbed her. Cold hands, glowing eyes. She screamed. Then, blackness. She woke up shaking. She ran to the medroom. "You remembered, didn't you?" her father asked gently. She nodded. "They took me. They wiped everything. But I still knew your voice." He held her hand. "They tried to erase love, but it doesn't go away that easily." She sat beside him. "They lied to everyone, not just me." He sighed. "And now you know why I searched so long, not just for you, but for the truth." Over the next few days, Selira explored the rebel base. She met people who had lost everything. Families destroyed by council attacks. Aliens punished for helping humans. Young minds afraid to think freely because they feared the mind readers like her. She saw what she had been a part of, and it crushed her. One day, a small girl pointed at her. "That's the witch, the one from the council." Her mother pulled her away quickly. Selira didn't speak, because the child was right. Later that night, the silver-haired rebel leader, Commander Talia, asked to speak with her. They sat alone in a quiet room. "You understand why people are afraid of you," Talia said. Selira nodded. "I used to read minds without asking. I didn't think it was wrong. Now, I see everything differently." "We don't trust easily here," Talia said. "But your father trusted you. That means something." "I want to help," Selira said. "Not with weapons, with truth." Talia studied her. "There is one thing you can do." "What is it?" "Go back into your own mind. Unlock the rest of your memories. We believe the council hid something in you. Something dangerous." "Like what?" "A code. A weapon. Something they didn't want even you to find." Selira felt her hands grow cold. "What if it breaks me?" Talia said, "Then let us catch you." That night, Selira sat alone in the meditation chamber. She closed her eyes and let herself fall. She passed through layers of thoughts, memories, and voices, old, broken ones, some real, some created. Then she saw it. A black door. Sealed, pulsing, alive. She touched it. Pain exploded in her skull. She screamed. In her mind, she was standing in a white room. 7 council members stood before her. "You are our finest creation," they said. "You were made for control, not for love, not for freedom, not for truth." "I was a child," she whispered. "You were a tool." They raised their hands. Selira fell to her knees. But then, another voice. Her father's. "Mira, get up." She looked up. His voice grew stronger. "You're not a tool. You're my daughter." The black room cracked. The white light exploded. And the truth came flooding in. She woke up gasping, her head soaked in sweat. Talia and the doctors stood over her. "You were out for hours," Talia said. "What did you see?" Selira sat up, eyes wide. "It's inside me," she said. "They hid something." "What?" "A thought virus, a code that spreads through telepathy. If I had touched the mind of any rebel leader, the council would have known everything." Talia looked shaken. "So you were a weapon, the living spy." Selira nodded slowly. "But I broke it. It's gone now." "How?" "Because someone reminded me who I really was." That night, Selira walked outside the base. Her father sat near the entrance, looking at the stars. She sat beside him. "I remember everything now," she said. "My name, my past, the truth." He looked at her, proud. "Then you're finally free." She nodded. "But freedom comes with pain." "It always does," he replied. She took his hand. "They'll come for us soon," she whispered. The council. They'll never stop. He smiled. Then let them come. This time, we're ready. She refused to kill the only one who ever loved her. The message came at dawn. A sharp beeping woke Celera from sleep. She sat up in her bed, heart racing, and tapped the small screen near her pillow. Incoming transmission. Council Priority Level 1. Her breath caught. For a moment, she thought of ignoring it. But something told her this wasn't just a message, it was a warning. She answered. The hologram flickered to life. 7 tall figures with glowing eyes appeared. The High Council. Cold. Silent. Watching her. Then, the one in the center spoke in her mind. We have been generous with you, Celera. We gave you power. We gave you purpose. She stared, silent. But you failed us. You helped the human escape. You lied. You betrayed. His name is Ruyan, she said calmly. And he's not just a human. He's my father. A long pause. Then another voice. Irrelevant. We created you. We own you. And now you will fix your mistake. Celera frowned. How? Bring him back, or kill him. Her stomach turned. I won't do either, she whispered. The center figure leaned closer in the projection. Its eyes glowed brighter. Then you are no longer one of us. The screen went black. An alarm sounded through the rebel base. Commander Talia rushed into Celera's room. What happened? They gave me a choice, Celera said. Bring my father to them, or kill him. Talia's jaw clenched. They're afraid. They should be. What will you do? Celera stood slowly. Protect the only person who's ever loved me. By noon, the Council's ships were already approaching. The rebel base went into lockdown. Shields rose. Weapons were armed. Inside the medical wing, Celera found her father getting dressed. He looked at her and smiled. I heard the Council called. She nodded. They gave me orders. And I gave them silence. He laughed softly. That's my girl. She walked over and helped him with his jacket. His movements were slower than before. His wound hadn't healed fully, but he was strong enough to stand. We might have to run again, she said. He shook his head. We can't keep running forever. I know. They stood in silence for a moment. Then he said, if they try to force you to choose again, between me and your safety, I want you to pick yourself. No, she said quickly. Mira. No, she said again, louder. I lost you once. I won't lose you again. Tears welled up in his eyes. I don't deserve you, he whispered. You're wrong, she said. You're the only one who never tried to control me. Hours later, the Council's lead cruiser landed on the surface of the moon. A voice echoed through the base. Celera, come alone, or we destroy everything. Commander Talia looked at her. It's a trap. Celera nodded. I know. You're not going alone, Talia said. But Celera held up her hand. I must. Why? Because I'm going to end this. Not with weapons. With truth. Outside, under the cracked sky, Celera walked alone toward the cruiser. She wore no armor, no weapons, only a small device in her hand, the same one they once gave her to kill her father. Now, it held something else. As she reached the Council, they formed a circle around her. The lead figure stepped forward. Where is the human? Safe, she replied. You dare disobey us. I dare to be free. You belong to us. No, not anymore. Celera held up the device. They prepared to strike, but she didn't activate it. Instead, she pressed a small button on her belt. A signal burst out across the sky. Deep inside the rebel base, hidden machines activated. Satellites turned. Transmitters lit up. Across hundreds of worlds, a message began to play. Her voice. Her truth. This is Celera. I was raised by the Council, trained to read your minds, taught to control your thoughts. I believed I was helping. I was wrong. They erased my past. They turned me into a weapon. But now I remember who I am. My name is Mira. I am human, and I will no longer be their tool. If you hear this, know the truth. You are not alone. They lied to you. They lied to all of us. The council screamed inside their minds. What have you done? Celera smiled. I set the galaxy free. They tried to grab her, but before they could, rebel ships burst through the clouds. Blaster fire lit the sky. Celera ran back toward the base. Her heart pounded, not with fear, but with hope. Inside, chaos erupted. Soldiers fired. Alarms rang. Ships clashed above the moon. But through it all, she found her father. He held a rifle, ready. You came back, he said. Always, she replied. They fought side by side, protecting the base, saving the people. By nightfall, the Council's forces had retreated. The galaxy was waking up. On hundreds of worlds, people were asking questions. Who is Mira? What did the Council do? Why did they lie? Change had begun. And Celera, no Mira, was at the heart of it. Back inside the quiet base, she sat with her father. His arm was wrapped, his face tired. But he smiled. You saved me, he said. You saved me first, she replied. He looked at her gently. You were born with the power to hear every thought in the galaxy. Yes, she said softly. But only one ever made you cry. She nodded. And now I know why. He tilted his head. Because it wasn't just pain I felt. It was love. Buried so deep, even I forgot it. They sat quietly. The stars blinked above them. Somewhere, across space, minds were opening. Lies were falling. Hearts were healing. And for the first time in her life, Celera felt truly free. Wanted across the galaxy. But she has a plan. News of her message spread fast. Faster than the Council could stop it. On mining colonies, people gathered around small screens to hear her words. On distant moons, old rebels whispered her name. Even in secret council labs, scientists paused, their hands shaking as her voice echoed through hidden speakers. My name is Mira, and I will no longer be their tool. Those 10 words changed everything, but not everyone was celebrating. In the cold chambers of the Galactic Council, the High Elders stood in a circle, their robes dark, their eyes burning. This is war, one of them hissed. She infected the galaxy with truth, said another. Truth is more dangerous than fire. The leader of the council slammed his staff to the ground. Find her, break her, and silence her forever. Mira stood at the edge of the rebel base's landing platform, staring at the stars. They looked the same as always. Quiet, endless, beautiful. But now she knew how many lies were hidden behind them. Her hands rested on the rail. Her mind drifted, not into the thoughts of others, but into silence. For once, she didn't want to listen to anyone else. She just wanted to feel. Footsteps approached. Her father stood beside her, his arm wrapped in bandages, his breath slower than usual. They're going to come for you, he said. She nodded. I know. They'll paint you as a traitor, a virus, a mistake. I was a mistake they created, she said quietly. But now, I'm rewriting the code. He smiled. That's my girl. She turned to him. Your injury. It's worse, isn't it? He hesitated, then nodded. The wound was deeper than we thought. Something inside. It's failing. Mira closed her eyes. I can try to fix it. No, he said gently. You've done enough. You gave me something the council never could. What? A reason to believe again. Hours later, the rebel base held a secret meeting. Commanders, scientists, alien allies, all gathered in the underground chamber. Mira stood in front of them. The council will come for me. They'll come for all of us, she said. But we don't have to run. What do you suggest? Asked a young officer. Mira stepped forward. We used the same weapon they gave me. Information. She pulled up a glowing map of the galaxy. Dots blinked across it, each one a hidden lab, prison, or council control zone. They connected my mind to every major system, she said. Even after I broke free, the connections remain. If I reach them again, I can send a final message. Not just words. Proof. Proof of what? Talia asked. Mira's eyes burned with quiet fire. Of everything. The memory wipes. The stolen children. The living weapons they created. A silence fell over the room. Then someone asked, "And how do you plan to do that?" Mira turned to her father. By connecting to the one person who still remembers everything. And never let them erase it. Later that night, she sat beside her father's bed. His breathing was slow now. She held his hand. "I need to link with you," she said. He opened his eyes. "You sure? It's the only way." "Then do it." Mira closed her eyes and entered his mind. She floated through memories. Earth before the war. Green hills. Blue skies. Laughter. Then the invasion. Fire. Screams. Loss. Then her. A little girl laughing on his shoulders, whispering secrets, hiding in blankets, then being taken. Then silence. She reached deeper, beneath the pain, beneath the grief, and found a small glowing piece of light. Her name, Mira. She grabbed it and pulled. Outside, machines lit up across the base, satellites realigned, ancient council codes unlocked. Mira's voice returned, but this time, so did her father's memories. People across the galaxy didn't just hear her story. They saw it. They saw the moment she was taken. They saw the council erase her identity. They saw Ryan's years of searching. They saw the day she cried in the prison cell. And finally, they saw her speak the truth. The message ended with one line, spoken by both of them together. "You can silence a mind, but not a memory." The galaxy changed that day. Again. On planets where humans were hunted, people began hiding them. On council-controlled ships, officers lowered their weapons. On silent moons, children whispered the name Mira like a prayer. But in the shadows, the council moved fast. They couldn't kill the message. So they made a new one. Wanted. Subject Mira. Telepath. Traitor. Destroyer. Reward. 10 million credits. Dead or alive. Back at the rebel base, Mira sat beside her father's bed. He was still asleep, but his hand was warm. A doctor walked in. Her face was serious. "His body can't fight anymore," she said. Mira nodded. "But," the doctor added, "if we can find a stable hybrid core, we might be able to transfer part of his neural energy into a new form. It's risky. It's never been done with humans." Mira looked down. "I'll do anything." "Then you better hurry. He doesn't have much time." Mira left the base the next morning. Alone. Just her, a small ship, and a coded list of abandoned research stations. Somewhere out there, the council had hidden hybrid cores, machines made to store minds, tools used for cruel experiments. Now she needed one. But the galaxy was watching her. Hunters, spies, assassins. She knew they would come. But she also knew something else. She wasn't just a girl with a gift anymore. She was a name, a symbol, a voice that couldn't be erased. On the edge of space, in the black silence between stars, Mira whispered to herself, "They want to kill me, because I made them feel." And somewhere, deep inside her heart, another whisper answered, "And that is how you win." She cried one last time, and saved the galaxy. Mira flew alone through the frozen edge of the galaxy. Her ship was small. Its engine rattled. The windows were frosted from the cold of deep space. But she didn't care. Her father was dying. And this was her only chance. In her hand, she held the coordinates to an old station, codename Zero Core. It had once been a secret lab run by the Galactic Council. Now it was abandoned, forgotten, dangerous. But inside it, hidden deep underground, was the last working hybrid core in existence, a machine that could hold a human soul. Maybe. The station came into view, a broken ring floating above a dead planet. Its walls were cracked. Some lights still blinked. The doors were shut tight. Mira docked the ship and stepped out. Her boots crunched over broken glass and dust. Every corner of the station whispered of old pain. She followed the map in her mind, deeper and deeper underground, until she reached a metal door with 3 glowing circles. She placed her hand on the center. It lit up red, then yellow, then green. The door hissed open, and inside, the hybrid core was waiting. It looked like a cocoon made of glass and silver wires, pulsing with a soft white glow. It was still alive. Mira stepped closer. Her reflection stared back at her from the glass. Tired eyes, but strong. She placed the memory drive on the control panel, the one that carried her father's mind. The machine scanned it. Then a voice spoke. Memory pattern, human, damage, emotional levels, high, pain, severe. Would you like to begin transfer? She hesitated. Once she started, she couldn't stop it. But there was no other way. Yes, she said. Back on the rebel base, her father lay still. His body was weak, but inside the memory drive, his thoughts lived. His voice, his stories, his love. And now, it was being reborn. The hybrid core began to glow brighter. Mira watched, hands shaking. Lights raced across the machine's shell. Energy pulsed through wires. Then, slowly, a faint shadow appeared inside the glass. Not a body. Not yet. But a shape. A presence. Then, a whisper. Mira. Her heart stopped. She stepped forward. Dad? Is it really you? Tears filled her eyes. Yes. It's me. I found you. I brought you here. A pause. You were always smarter than me. She laughed, crying. You saved me, he said. And now you saved me too, she replied. But the moment didn't last. The floor shook. A loud alarm rang. Red lights blinked across the room. Mira spun around. On her ship's console, a signal flashed. Council destroyers approaching. 10 minutes until arrival. They had tracked her. They were coming. And they were bringing everything. Mira looked at the hybrid core. You're not stable yet, she said. I know. The transfer isn't finished. They'll try to destroy you. Then you must go. I won't leave you. You have to. Mira pressed her forehead to the glass. I lost you once, she whispered. I won't do it again. The shadow inside the glass flickered. Mira, you're not just my daughter. You're a symbol now. People are watching. They're listening. And they need you to survive. Tears ran down her face. Promise me, he said. I can't. Yes, you can. Promise me you'll finish what we started. She nodded slowly. I promise. She ran to the ship, ignited the engines, and flew straight into the sky. But she didn't run away. She flew straight toward the destroyers. The screen inside the ship blinked red. 6 massive council ships, ready to fire, ready to erase her from the stars. But Mira had a plan. She opened a secret channel, a wide broadcast, across the entire system. Her face appeared on every screen, in every home, every ship, every council outpost. And she spoke. You tried to silence me, but you made me louder. You tried to erase love, but you made it stronger. My father is gone, but his voice lives on, in me, in every rebel, in every child who still believes. You want me to be afraid, but I'm not. Because even if you destroy me, my truth already lives. She ended the message and turned off all navigation. Let them find her. Let them come. In a control room far away, the council elders watched in fury. "She's mocking us. Fire now." But something happened. Their officers hesitated. One by one, they turned away, refused orders. Even the machines hesitated, locked by a virus inside her message. Her truth had broken their system. From one end of the galaxy to the other, people were rising. Back near the hybrid core, the machines buzzed louder. Inside the glass, the shadow became clearer. Eyes, hands, a soft smile. The final line of code clicked into place. His mind was whole again. He breathed and whispered, "She did it." On Mira's ship, the lights flickered. An explosion rocked the side. She was caught. But before everything turned to fire, a voice echoed through the sky. "This is General Ryan. Stand down." The council destroyers paused. His voice came again. "This girl is under my protection. Attack her, and you attack me. And every rebel in the galaxy." People on council ships froze. They recognized his name. They recognized his strength. And now, they heard him again. Alive. Reborn. Mira woke up hours later in a rebel medical bay. Her face was bruised, her hands bandaged, but her eyes opened. Talia stood over her, smiling. "You survived," she said. Mira sat up slowly. "My father." Talia stepped aside. And there he was, standing, alive, but different. His body was synthetic now, half light, half metal, but his soul, the same. He stepped forward, arms open. She ran into them and cried. One last time. The war wasn't over, but something had changed. A fire had been lit. A new galaxy was being born. And in the center of it stood a girl who once cried in a prison cell and learned that love was the strongest voice of all.